What is the purpose of access control, e.g. private, public, internal, in Swift, and how does it contribute to building robust modules?
Access control, using keywords like private and public, helps you build strong code modules by hiding implementation details. You expose only a public API, which means you can change the internal code later without breaking other parts of your app that use it.
What are associated types and protocols and how do they enable more flexible and generic protocol definitions?
Associated types are placeholders for types within a protocol. This makes the protocol generic and more flexible. It means you can define a rule, like a container must hold items, without specifying what kind of item until a real type adopts the protocol.
Describe how you would implement a custom operator in Swift.
To create a custom operator, you first declare it with the operator keyword, defining if it's infix, prefix, or postfix. Then, you write a static function using the operator symbol as the function name to define what it does.
How can you use instruments to profile and identify performance bottlenecks in a Swift application?
To find performance problems, you use the Instruments tool in Xcode. Run your app with the Time Profiler to see which functions use the most CPU time. The call tree shows you exactly where your app is spending its time, helping you pinpoint and fix the slow parts.
What are some of the most impactful new features introduced in the latest version of Swift?
Major new Swift features include async await and actors, which make writing concurrent code much easier and safer. Macros let you generate code at compile time to reduce boilerplate. Also, improvements to generics and new keywords like some and any have made the language more powerful.
What is the code snippet at escaping attribute and when is it necessary to use it for a closure?
The at escaping attribute tells the compiler that a closure might be called after the function it was passed to is finished. You need this for asynchronous code, like a network request callback, to make sure the closure is kept in memory correctly.
Explain how memory is managed in Swift beyond Arc, for example, the memory layout of value and reference types.
Besides Arc, Swift's memory management depends on the type. Value types like structs are usually stored on the fast memory area called the stack. Reference types like classes are stored on a slower, more flexible area called the heap, with a pointer to them on the stack.
What are phantom types in Swift and what problem can they solve?
Phantom types are generic type parameters that are not actually used in the implementation of a type. They exist only to add extra information for the compiler, helping you enforce type safety. For example, you could use them to make sure a user ID is not accidentally used as a product ID.
How would you ensure thread safety when accessing a shared resource from multiple threads in Swift?
To ensure thread safety, you must control access to shared data. You can use a serial queue to make sure only one thread can access the data at a time. You can also use locks, or for modern Swift, you can use actors, which are designed to be thread safe.
Discuss concurrency in Swift. What are the differences between Grand Central Dispatch, GCD, and operation queues?
Concurrency means running multiple tasks at once. Grand Central Dispatch, or GCD, is a low-level API for managing tasks. Operation Queue is a higher-level tool built on GCD that offers more control, like setting dependencies between tasks and canceling them.
Explain the concept of protocol-oriented programming and how it differs from object-oriented programming.
Protocol-oriented programming focuses on creating functionality using protocols, which is very flexible since structs and enums can use them. This is different from object-oriented programming, which mainly relies on class inheritance.
How do you define a custom subscript for a type in Swift?
You can add a custom subscript by using the code snippet, subscript keyword inside your type. You then provide a getter and an optional setter. This allows you to access elements of your type using square brackets, just like with an array.
What is the difference between any and any object in Swift?
Code snippet. Any can be any type, including structs, enums, or classes. Code snippet. Any object can only be an instance of a class.
Explain the use and benefits of property wrappers in Swift with an example.
Property wrappers let you extract common logic for properties into a separate, reusable component. This cleans up your code. For instance, you could create a wrapper to automatically save and retrieve a property's value from user defaults.
What is the function of the map, filter, and reduce methods on collection types?
Map, filter, and reduce are functions for collections. Map transforms each item into a new item. Filter creates a new collection with only the items that pass a test. Reduce combines all items into a single value.
Describe what a generic function is, and why it is a powerful feature in Swift.
A generic function is one that can work with any type. This feature is powerful because it lets you write reusable code without repeating yourself, and it keeps your code type safe.
What are protocols in Swift and how can they be used to achieve polymorphism?
Protocols are like contracts that define a set of methods and properties. Different types can conform to them. They enable polymorphism by letting you write code that works with any type that follows the protocol's rules.
What are closures in Swift? Can you provide an example of a trailing closure?
Closures are blocks of code you can pass around as variables. When a closure is the last argument to a function, you can use trailing closure syntax, which lets you write it after the function's parentheses, making the code cleaner.
Explain automatic reference counting, ARC, and the difference between strong, weak, and unowned references.
Automatic reference counting, or ARC, manages memory. A strong reference keeps an object alive. A weak reference does not, and is used to prevent memory leaks called reference cycles. An unowned reference also doesn't keep an object alive, but assumes it will never be nil.
What is the role of the Codable protocol in Swift and how does it simplify data parsing?
The Codable protocol makes it easy to convert your data models to and from formats like JSON. When you make your type codable, Swift automatically handles the parsing for you, saving a lot of time in code.
How does basic error handling work in Swift using the do-try-catch block?
Error handling works with a do-try-catch block. Code that might fail goes in the do block and is called with the try keyword. If an error occurs, the catch block runs to handle it.
Describe the difference between let and var for declaring constants and variables in Swift.
Use let to declare a constant, which cannot be changed. Use var to declare a variable, which can be changed. You should always prefer let unless you know you'll need to reassign the value.
What is the purpose of the nil coalescing operator? And provide a practical example of its use.
The nil coalescing operator, written with 2 question marks, provides a default value for an optional if it's nil. For example, let name equal optional name question mark quote guess quote.
Explain the concept of optionals and the problem they solve in Swift. How do you safely unwrap them?
Optionals handle values that might be nil, which prevents app crashes. An optional either has a value or it doesn't. You can safely unwrap them using iflet, guardlet, or the nil coalescing operator.
What is the key difference between a struct and a class in Swift, and in which scenarios would you choose one over the other?
The key difference is that structs are value types, which get copied, and classes are reference types, which are shared. Use structs for simple data. Use classes when you need inheritance or to share a single instance of data.
What is Swift UI and how is it different from UIKit?
Swift UI is Apple's modern framework for building user interfaces. It uses a declarative style, where you describe what your UI should look like based on data. UIKit is the older, imperative framework, where you write step-by-step code to create and manage UI elements. Swift UI is designed to work across all Apple platforms, while UIKit is primarily for iOS.
What is the purpose of the code snippet? Codable protocol.
The Codable protocol in Swift makes it easy to convert your custom data types, like structs or classes, to and from formats like JSON. This is very useful for working with web APIs.
What is the difference between code snippet, escaping and code snippet, non-escaping closures?
A non-escaping closure, which is the default, is executed before the function it was passed to returns. An escaping closure is one that gets executed later, after the function has already returned, like in a network requests completion handler. You have to explicitly mark closures as escaping.
How do you achieve concurrency in Swift?
You can achieve concurrency in Swift in a few ways. The modern way is using async and await, which makes asynchronous code easy to read. You can also use Grand Central Dispatch, or GCD, which is a lower-level API for managing tasks on different queues. Another option is Operations, which is a more object-oriented approach built on top of GCD.
What is the difference between code snippet, defer and code snippet? Finally,
Defer is a Swift keyword. Code in a defer block runs just before the current function exits, no matter why it exits. It's used for cleanup. Finally is a keyword from other languages like Java for try-catch blocks. Swift doesn't have finally, but you can get the same result by using defer inside a do-catch block.
what is the difference between code snippet, KVO and code snippet, KVC?
KDC, or key value coding, lets you access an object's properties using a string name. KVO, or key value observing, lets an object be notified when another object's property changes. KVO is built on top of KDC.
What is the purpose of code snippet at autoclosure in Swift?
The @AutoClosure attribute lets you pass a simple expression to a function where a closure is expected, without using the curly braces. It wraps your expression in a closure automatically. This is useful for delaying the execution of the expression until it's actually needed, which can improve performance.
What is the difference between code snippet, final code snippet, override and code snippet, dynamic in Swift?
Final, override, and dynamic control inheritance and method calls. Final prevents a class or method from being changed by a subclass. Override is used in a subclass to provide a new implementation for an inherited method. Dynamic forces a method to be called in a way that allows it to be changed at runtime, which is needed for features like KVO.
How would you implement a cache in Swift?
To implement a cache in Swift, you can use Apple's NSCache class. It's better than a simple dictionary, because it automatically removes items when memory is low and is thread safe. You create an instance of NSCache, then use its methods to add and retrieve objects.
What is a memory leak and how can you detect it?
A memory leak is when your app holds onto memory it no longer needs, which can slow it down or cause it to crash. In Swift, this often happens when two objects have strong references to each other. You can find leaks using Xcode's memory graph debugger or the leaks instrument, or by putting a print statement in an object's DayNet method to see if it gets called.
What is dependency injection and how can it be implemented in Swift?
Dependency injection is a pattern where you provide an object with the things it needs, its dependencies, instead of having it create them itself. This makes your code more flexible and easier to test. You can do this by passing dependencies into the initializer, setting them as properties, or passing them to a specific method.
What are some common design patterns used in Swift development?
Common design patterns in Swift include singleton, for when you only need one instance of a class, and MVC or MVVM, which help organize your app's code. The delegate pattern is also very common for communication between objects, and the coordinator pattern helps manage navigation flow.
What is the difference between code snippet, static and code snippet, class functions in a class?
Both static and class keywords create methods that belong to the class, not an instance. The main difference is that a code snippet, class method can be overridden by a subclass, while a code snippet, static method cannot.
What is method swizzling and when would you use it?
Method swizzling is a powerful but risky technique to change what a method does at runtime. You essentially swap the code of one method with another. It's sometimes used for debugging or analytics, like tracking when views appear on screen without changing the original code.
What is optional chaining?
Optional chaining is a safe way to access properties or call methods on an optional variable that might be nil. If the optional has a value, the code runs. If it's nil, the code simply stops and returns nil, preventing a crash.
What is the difference between code snippet, map, code snippet filter and code snippet, reduce in Swift?
Map, filter, and reduce are functions for collections. Map transforms every element and returns a new array of the same size. Filter selects elements that match a condition and returns a new, possibly smaller, array. Reduce combines all elements into a single final value.
What is protocol-oriented programming?
Protocol-oriented programming is a way of writing code in Swift that favors protocols over class inheritance. Instead of building deep class hierarchies, you create small, reusable protocols and then have your types, like classes or structs, conform to them. This makes your code more flexible and easier to manage.
What is a protocol in Swift and how is it used?
A protocol in Swift is like a blueprint. It defines a set of methods and properties, but doesn't implement them. Then, a class or struct can adopt this protocol and provide the actual code for those requirements. It's a way to define a contract for what a type can do.
Explain the difference between code snippet, strong code snippet, weak and code snippet, unowned references.
Strong, weak, and unowned are about memory management. A strong reference is the default and prevents an object from being deleted. Weak references don't stop an object from being deleted and become nil if it is, so they must be optional. They are used to prevent memory leaks. Unowned references also don't stop an object from being deleted, but are not optional. Use them only when you are sure the object will always exist, otherwise your app will crash.
What are value and reference types in Swift?
Value types, like structs and integers, are copied when assigned or passed to a function. Each variable has its own unique copy of the data. Reference types, like classes, share a single instance. When you assign or pass them, you are just passing a pointer to the same memory location. Changes made through one variable will affect the other.
What is type inference in Swift?
Type inference is a Swift feature where the compiler automatically figures out the data type of a variable based on the value you assign to it. This means you don't always have to write out the type, making your code shorter.
What is the purpose of the code snippet, guard statement in Swift?
The guard statement in Swift is for exiting early from a function or loop if a condition isn't true. It helps make code cleaner by handling errors or invalid conditions right at the start. A guard statement always requires an else block with a command like return or break.
What are the different types of closures in Swift?
Swift has 3 types of closures. Global functions which are named and don't capture values. Nested functions which are named and can capture values from the function they are inside. And closure expressions, which are unnamed blocks of code often used with functions like map and filter.
Explain the concept of optionals in Swift.
Optionals in Swift handle situations where a value might be absent. A variable marked as optional can hold a specific value, or it can be nil. This makes your code safer because you must check for nil before using the value.
What are the basic data types in Swift?
Swift's basic data types include int for whole numbers, double and float for decimal numbers, bool for true or false values, and string for text. Collection types like array, set, and dictionary are also fundamental.
What is type encoding, code snippet at encode, and how is it used by the Objective-C runtime for introspection?
Type encoding, using the add encode directive, creates a short string that represents a data type, like I for an integer. The runtime system uses these strings to understand the types of arguments and return values for a method, which is crucial for dynamic features like message forwarding.
Describe how you would set up and use a bridging header to expose Objective-C interfaces to a Swift project.
To use Objective-C in a Swift project, you create a bridging header file. You tell Xcode where this file is in the build settings. Inside the file, you just import the Objective-C headers you want to use. Swift can then see and use those Objective-C classes.
Explain how tag pointers work as an optimization and for which data types they are used.
Tag pointers are a performance trick. For small objects like numbers, the data is stored directly inside the pointer itself instead of in a separate memory location. This is much faster and uses less memory.
How do you create a custom designated initializer, and why is it important to call the superclass's designated initializer?
A designated initializer is the main initializer for a class. When you make a custom one, the most important rule is to call the superclass's designated initializer first. This makes sure the entire object, including its inherited parts, is set up correctly.
How do non-fragile instance variables, EVARs, work and why were they a significant improvement for binary compatibility?
Non-fragile instance variables allow developers to add new variables to a class without breaking older apps that use that class. It adds a layer of flexibility so that subclasses don't need to be recompiled when a parent class is updated. This improves binary compatibility.
What is a class cluster, and which standard foundation classes, e.g. code snippet, NSNumber, code snippet, NSArray, use this pattern?
A class cluster is a design pattern where a public class hides a group of private specialized subclasses. When you ask the public class for an object, it gives you back one of the private ones that is best suited for the job. NSArray, NSString, and NSNumber all use this pattern.
Describe the role of the code snippet, ISA pointer in the Objective-C object model, and its relationship to class objects.
Every object has an ISA pointer, which means ISA. This pointer points to the object's class. The system uses the ISA pointer to figure out what kind of object it is, and to find the correct code to run when you call a method on it.
What is method swizzling? Describe a scenario where it might be useful and also explain its potential dangers.
Method swizzling means swapping a method's original code with your own custom code at runtime. It can be useful for things like logging analytics for every screen in an app. The danger is that it can break the original functionality or cause crashes if you're not careful, especially with system methods.
Explain the full message forwarding mechanism in Objective-C, including all three potential receiver steps.
Message forwarding happens in 3 steps when a method can't be found. First, dynamic resolution tries to add the method on the fly. Second, fast forwarding tries to pass the message to a different object. Third, full forwarding packages the message into an invocation object, giving you full control to handle it however you want.
What are associated objects and when would you use them as an alternative to subclassing?
Associated objects let you attach extra data to an object at runtime. It's like adding an instance variable to an object after it's already been created. You would use this in a category to add state, which categories normally cannot do.
What is the difference between code snippet, nil code snippet, nil code snippet, null and code snippet, NSNull?
Nil is a null object pointer. Capital N nil is a null class pointer. NULL is a null C-style pointer. And NSNull is a special object used to represent null in collections like arrays, which can't store nil.
How would you implement a thread-safe singleton in Objective-C?
To make a thread-safe singleton, you use a function called dispatch_once. This ensures that the code to create the single instance of your class is run only one time, even if multiple threads try to access it at the same time.
Describe the main differences and primary use cases for Grand Central Dispatch, GCD, versus Code Snippet, NS Operation Queue.
GCD is a low-level way to run code in the background and is great for simple tasks. NS Operation Queue is a higher-level tool that's better for complex background work where you need to manage dependencies or cancel operations.
What is the difference between the code snippet at Synthesize and code snippet at Dynamic Property Keywords?
Synthesize tells the compiler to automatically create the getter and setter for a property, which is now the default. Dynamic tells the compiler not to worry about the getter and setter, because they will be provided in some other way at runtime.
Explain what a block is and how you'd avoid a retain cycle when using a block that captures code snippet, self.
A block is a piece of code that you can pass around like a variable. A retain cycle can happen if an object and a block hold strong references to each other. To fix this, you create a weak reference to self before the block and use that weak reference inside it.
What is the purpose of encode snippet at auto-releasable block, especially within a processing loop?
An auto-release pool manages temporary objects. Inside a long loop, creating a local pool ensures that temporary objects created during each cycle are released right away. This prevents the app from using too much memory.
How does a code snippet 4. In loop, fast enumeration, work with the code snippet, NS fast enumeration protocol?
A for in loop is a very fast way to go through a collection. It works with a protocol called NS fast enumeration. Instead of getting items one by one, it gets them in large batches, which is much more efficient.
Describe the difference between code snippet, atomic and code snippet, non-atomic properties and their performance implications.
Atomic properties ensure that getting or setting a value is a single, complete operation, which is safer in multi-threaded code but slower. Non-atomic properties don't have this safety guarantee but are much faster. Most developers use non-atomic.
What is a protocol in Objective-C, and how does it enable the delegation pattern?
A protocol is a list of methods that a class can promise to implement. It's like a contract. This is used for delegation, where one object can have another object, the delegate, do work for it by calling the methods defined in the protocol.
Explain key value observing, KVO, and provide a practical example of its use.
Key value observing lets an object get notified when a property of another object changes. For example, a user interface element can watch a data model and automatically update itself when the data changes.
What is the difference between code snippet, is kind of class, and code snippet, is member of class?
Is member of class checks if an object is an instance of one specific class. Is kind of class checks if an object is an instance of that class or any of its subclasses. Is kind of class is used more often.
How do you use categories to add methods to existing classes? What are their limitations?
Categories let you add new methods to a class without having to create a subclass. You just declare and implement the new methods in a separate file. The main limitation is that you cannot add new instance variables.
What is the code snippet ID type, and when is it appropriate to use it over a static type?
The ID type is a general pointer for any Objective-C object. You use it when you don't know the exact class of an object when you're writing the code, like when objects are stored in a collection.
Explain automatic reference counting, ARC, and how it differs from manual retain release, MRR.
Automatic reference counting, or ARC, has the compiler automatically add memory management code for you. Manual retain release meant the programmer had to do it all by hand. ARC is much easier and safer.
What is the difference between code snippet, strong code snippet, weak code snippet, assign and code snippet, copy property attributes?
Strong creates an owning relationship to keep an object in memory. Weak creates a non-owning relationship that becomes nil if the object is deleted. Assign is a simple assignment for primitive types like integers. Copy creates a new, independent copy of the object.
What is the difference between present and show, or show detail view controller, for presenting a view controller, and in what scenarios would you use each?
Present shows a view controller modally, covering the previous screen for a temporary task. Show is smarter. If you are in a navigation controller, it pushes the new screen onto the stack. If not, it presents it modally. Show is generally preferred because it adapts to its context.
Describe how you would implement accessibility in a UIKit application to support users with disabilities.
To implement accessibility, you help screen readers like VoiceOver by setting an accessibility label that describes each UI element. You should also use dynamic type so text resizes according to the user's preference. Ensure your app has good color contrast and doesn't rely on color alone to convey information.
What is the purpose of the Prepare for Sender method in UIView controller?
The Prepare for Segue method is called just before navigating to a new screen. It's where you pass data from the current view controller to the one you are about to show. You can get a reference to the destination view controller and set its properties with any information it needs.
How do you manage memory in a UIKit application, especially when dealing with large images or complex view hierarchies?
To manage memory, especially with large images, you should resize them to the display size before using them. Don't load a huge image into a small image view. For complex view hierarchies, use recycling in table views and collection views, and lazily load views that aren't visible yet. Always be careful to avoid memory leaks by using weak references where needed.
Explain the difference between UITableView diffable data source and the traditional UITableView data source, and the benefits of using the diffable data source.
The old table view data source requires you to manually calculate and tell the table view about every insertion, deletion, or move, which can cause crashes. The new diffable data source is much safer. You just give it a new snapshot of your data, and it automatically figures out what changed and animates the table view for you.
What is the role of your gesture recognizer, and how can you create a custom one?
A UI gesture recognizer detects common gestures like taps and swipes. To create a custom one, you subclass it and track touch events yourself. You override methods for when touches begin, move, and end. When you detect your custom pattern, you change the recognizer state to recognized.
Describe how you would handle state restoration in a UIKit application to provide a seamless user experience.
State restoration saves your app's UI, so the user can return to where they left off. You enable it in the app delegate and assign restoration ID.S to your view controllers. Then you implement methods to save and restore specific data for each screen, like what text was entered or which item was selected.
What are instruments and how can you use them to debug performance issues like memory leaks or slow UI rendering in a UIKit application?
Instruments is a tool in Xcode for finding performance problems. You can use the Leaks instrument to find memory leaks. The Time Profiler helps you find slow code. The Core Animation instrument helps you debug slow UI rendering by checking things like frame rate and layer complexity.
How would you implement a custom UIView controller transition?
To create a custom view controller transition, you set a transitioning delegate on the view controller. This delegate provides an animator object. The animator's animate transition method gives you a context with the from and to views. You then use UI view animations to move, fade, or transform the views and call a completion handler when you're done.
Explain the difference between strong, weak, and unowned references in Swift, and provide a real-world example of where you would use a weak reference in UIKit to avoid a retain cycle.
In Swift, a strong reference keeps an object in memory. A weak reference does not, and it becomes nil if the object is removed. This prevents retain cycles, which are memory leaks. An unowned reference is similar to weak, but is not optional, and will crash if the object is gone. A common example of a weak reference is a delegate property, which often points back to a parent object.
How does the view drawing cycle work in iOS? Explain the roles of setNeedsDisplay and DrawRect.
The view drawing cycle renders a view. You call setNeedsDisplay to mark a view as needing a redraw. This tells the system to call the viewsDraw method during the next screen update. You never call the draw method yourself. The system handles it.
What is the difference between setNeedsLayout and layout if needed?
setNeedsLayout tells the system I need a layout update later, and returns right away. Layout if needed forces the system to perform the layout update immediately right now. You use layout if needed when you need the frame to be correct before the next line of code runs.
Explain how to use Grand Central Dispatch (GCD) to perform background tasks and update the UI on the main thread.
To run a task in the background, you use Grand Central Dispatch, or GCD. You dispatch the work to a global queue to avoid freezing the user interface. When the task is done, you dispatch back to the main queue to safely update your views with the results.
What are the benefits of using a UI collection view over a UI table view?
A table view is great for simple, single-column lists. A collection view is much more flexible. It lets you create complex layouts, like multi-column grids, and it supports both horizontal and vertical scrolling, making it ideal for things like photo galleries.
How can you create a custom view in UIKit from scratch, both programmatically and using a XIB file?
To make a custom view programmatically, use subclass view and add other views as subviews in its code. Using an XIB file, you design the view visually in Interface Builder, create a corresponding view subclass as the file's owner, and write code to load the XIB.
What is the purpose of colliers and how do they relate to UI views?
Every view has a layer. The view handles user touches and layout, while its layer handles the actual drawing and animation. For things like rounded corners, shadows, or borders, you modify the view's layer property.
Describe the responder chain in iOS and how it handles events.
The responder chain is the path an event, like a touch, travels through your app to find an object to handle it. It starts with the view that was touched, then goes to its parent view, then to the view controller, and so on, until an object handles the event or it's discarded.
What is the difference between content hugging priority and content compression resistance priority?
Content hugging and compression resistance are auto layout priorities. A high hugging priority tells a view to resist growing. A high compression resistance priority tells a view to resist shrinking. It's about how much a view wants to stay at its natural size.
Explain the concept of view recycling in UI Table View and why it's important.
Table view recycling is a performance trick. Instead of creating a new cell for every item in a list, the table view reuses cells that have scrolled off screen. It takes an old cell, puts new data in it, and shows it again. This saves memory and keeps scrolling smooth.
What is the role of the app delegate in an iOS application?
The app delegate is a core object in an iOS app. It handles important app-level events like what happens when the app launches, when it goes into the background, and when it is about to terminate.
How do you handle user input in UIKit using IB actions?
You handle user input with IB actions. You create a method in your code marked with an IB action and connect it to a user interface element like a button in the storyboard. When the user taps the button, your method is called.
What are the different types of UI stack view distributions and alignments?
Stack view distribution options like fill, equal spacing, and fill proportionally control the size and spacing of items along its main axis. Alignment options like fill, center, leading, and trailing control how items are positioned across its other axis.
What is auto layout and how do you use it to create adaptive UIs?
Auto layout is a system that arranges your user interface based on rules called constraints. You use it to make apps that look good on any screen size by defining relationships between elements, like this button should always be 8 points from the right edge.
Explain the View Controller lifecycle in UIKit.
The View Controller lifecycle includes methods like View did load for initial setup, View will appear right before it shows, View did appear after it shows, View will disappear before it hides, and View did disappear after it hides.
What is the difference between a frame and bounds in a UI view?
A view's frame is its position relative to its parent view. A view's bounds is its own internal drawing area, with the origin usually at 0, 0.
How do you write unit and UI tests for a SwiftUI application?
For unit tests, you test your data models and logic separately from the user interface. For UI tests, you use Apple's Scutis framework. Your test code will launch the app, find buttons and text fields using accessibility labels, interact with them, and then check if the screen updated correctly.
What are some of the new features in the latest version of SwiftUI?
The newest SwiftUI brings cool features, like a simpler way to make previews. There are powerful new animation tools, including animations that react as you scroll. A new hashtag observable macro makes data handling easier, and Swift Data provides a modern way to save data. Plus, widgets are now interactive.
Explain how to use core data with SwiftUI.
To use core data with SwiftUI, you first set up your database and put its context into the app's environment. Then, in your views, you can use a fetch request to easily load data. To make changes, you get the context from the environment and use it to add, edit, or delete data.
How would you go about debugging a SwiftUI view hierarchy?
To debug a SwiftUI view, you can print messages to the console to see when a view updates. You can also use Xcode's visual debugger to inspect the view hierarchy. A simple trick is to add colored borders or backgrounds to your views to see how much space they are taking up on the screen.
What is the difference between add-environment and add-environment-object?
Add-environment is for reading system-wide settings, like whether the phone is in dark mode. Add-environment-object is for accessing your own shared data that you've placed into the environment for many views to use. Think of add-environment for system info and add-environment-object for your app's shared info.
How do you create a custom layout in SwiftUI?
To create a completely custom layout in SwiftUI, you can use the layout protocol. You define a new layout container where you tell SwiftUI exactly how big it should be and where to place each child view. This lets you build arrangements that go beyond simple vertical or horizontal stacks.
What are some performance considerations to keep in mind when building a SwiftUI app?
To make your SwiftUI app run fast, first, make sure only the parts of the screen that need to change are updated. Second, use the correct data management tools like its DataJect. Third, for long lists, use lazy stacks so your app only creates what's visible. Finally, be careful with tools like Geometry Reader inside lists as they can slow things down.
Explain the concept of preference key and how it can be used.
Preference key is a special mechanism in SwiftUI that lets a child view send information back up to its parent. It's like a child raising its hand to tell the parent something important, like its size. The parent can then use that information to adjust the layout for everyone.
How do you handle complex navigation flows in a large SwiftUI application?
For complex navigation in a big app, simple links aren't enough. It's better to control navigation with your app's data. Modern SwiftUI offers Navigation Stack, which lets you manage the navigation path like a list you can add to or remove from. This makes it much easier to handle complicated flows.
What is the Geometry Reader and what are its use cases?
Geometry Reader is a tool that tells you the size and position of the space a view has available. You can use this information to make your layout responsive so it looks good on any screen size, or to place views in very specific spots.
How do you create custom animations in SwiftUI?
In SwiftUI, you can create animations in two main ways. You can use the animation modifier to make any changes to a view animate automatically. Or, for more control, you can wrap your data changes inside a with animation block to tell SwiftUI exactly what to animate and how.
What are atStateObject and atPublished and how do they work together?
atStateObject is used in a view to create and own a complex data object. Inside that object, you mark properties with atPublished. When a atPublished property changes, it tells the atStateObject, which then tells the view to update its appearance.
Explain the concept of data flow in SwiftUI.
In SwiftUI, data flows in one direction, from the source down to the views. When the data changes, the views that depend on it automatically update. If a child view needs to change the data, it uses a special link called a binding to communicate back up to the source, keeping everything in sync.
How can you integrate a UIKit view into a SwiftUI view?
To use an old UIKit view in a new SwiftUI app, you wrap it in a special container that conforms to the UIView representable protocol. This lets you create the UIKit view and tell SwiftUI how to update it when your app's data changes.
What is the purpose of the ObservableObject protocol and the atObservedObject property wrapper?
ObservableObject is a tag you put on a class that holds your data, signaling that it can be watched for changes. In your view, you use atObservedObject to watch an instance of that class. When the data changes, the view automatically updates itself.
How do you handle user input in SwiftUI?
In SwiftUI, you handle user input with controls like text field or toggle, which are linked directly to your app's data. When the user types something or flips a switch, the data updates automatically. For taps and other actions, you can use a button or a gesture modifiers.
What is a view modifier and when would you use one?
A view modifier is a way to package up a bunch of style changes into one reusable tool. You'd use it when you want to apply the same look, like a specific font and color, to many different views in your app without repeating the code.
Explain the role of Navigation View and Navigation Link.
Navigation View sets up a screen so you can move between different views, like in a settings menu. Navigation Link is the button or link you tap on to go to the next screen in that navigation flow.
How do you create a list of items in SwiftUI?
To create a list in SwiftUI, you use the list view. You give it your data, and then for each piece of data, you tell it what the row should look like. It's an easy way to show a scrollable list of items.
Describe the difference between VStack, HStack, and ZStack.
VStack, HStack, and ZStack are tools for arranging things on the screen. VStack stacks items vertically, from top to bottom. HStack arranges items horizontally, from left to right. ZStack places items on top of each other, like a stack of pancakes.
What are atState, atBinding, and atEnvironmentObject property wrappers used for?
atState is for data that a view owns itself. atBinding is for letting a view change data that another view owns. atEnvironmentObject is like a shared shortcut to data that many views in your app can use without having to pass it around everywhere.
How do you manage state in a SwiftUI application?
In SwiftUI, you manage data using special tools called property wrappers. Use atState for simple data that a single view owns. To share data, you can use atBinding to pass it to a child view, or tools like atObservedObject and atEnvironmentObject for more complex data that many views need to access.
What is the purpose of the body property in a SwiftUI view?
The body is the part of a SwiftUI view where you describe what the view looks like. It's like the main recipe for a piece of your user interface. SwiftUI checks this recipe to draw and update the view on the screen.
Explain the concept of views and modifiers in SwiftUI.
In SwiftUI, views are the pieces that make up your screen, like text or an image. Modifiers are like settings you apply to those pieces to change how they look or act. For example, to change the color of text or add space around it.
What is SwiftUI and how does it differ from UIKit?
SwiftUI is Apple's modern, declarative way to build user interfaces. With SwiftUI, you say what you want the UI to look like, and the system figures out how to do it. This is different from the older UIKit, where you had to write step-by-step instructions to create and update your UI.
What is the role of Timeline View in creating animations?
Timeline View is a container that updates its content on a regular schedule, like a clock ticking. It doesn't animate things directly, but it tells your view when to redraw. By using the current time it provides, you can change your view's appearance over time, which is perfect for making timers or clocks.
How do you create a custom environment value?
To make a custom environment value, first, create a special key with a default value. Then, add a new property to the main environment values type using the key. Finally, you can inject your value with the environment modifier and read it in any child view.
What is the @FocusState property wrapper and how is it used?
The FocusState property wrapper helps you control which text field is currently active. You link a FocusState variable to your text fields using the Focus modifier. Then, by changing that variable in your code, you can make a specific text field active or make the keyboard go away.
How do you create a reusable style for a view in SwiftUI?
To create a reusable style, like for a button, you make a new struct that conforms to a style protocol, such as button style. In that struct, you define how the button should look and behave. Then, you can apply this custom style to any button in your app.
What is the purpose of the group view?
A group is a simple container for other views. Its two main uses are to apply a style to many views at once, and to get around the 10-view limit in a container by bundling several views into a single unit.
How do you handle user input and gestures in SwiftUI?
You handle user input in two ways. First, with simple controls like button or toggle. Second, for more complex interactions, you can add gestures like a tap or a drag to any view. These gestures let you track the user's touch and update your view's state.
Explain the purpose of the Match Geometry Effect modifier.
The Match Geometry Effect modifier creates smooth animations between two different views. You give both views the same special ID. When one view disappears and the other appears, SwiftUI animates the change so it looks like the view is magically moving and resizing to its new spot.
What are some strategies for optimizing performance in a complex SwiftUI view?
To make SwiftUI faster, use lazy stacks for long lists, so items are only created when they appear. Make sure only the views that need to change are redrawing. Avoid expensive tools like Geometry Reader. For very complex graphics, use the Drawing Group modifier to speed up rendering.
How can you use Swift concurrency, async/await, within a SwiftUI application?
You use async await in SwiftUI mainly with the task modifier on a view. This lets you call async functions with await to do work like fetching data. When you update state properties from this task, SwiftUI automatically refreshes the user interface on the main thread.
What is the difference between onAppear and task for loading data?
onAppear runs code when a view shows up, but it's not made for async work. You have to cancel tasks yourself. The task modifier is designed for async code. It starts a task when the view appears and automatically cancels it when the view goes away, which is safer and easier.
How do you manage accessibility in a SwiftUI application?
You make SwiftUI apps accessible with special modifiers. Accessibility label describes what an element is. Accessibility value gives its current state. Accessibility hint explains what it does. These help screen readers understand your app.
What is preference key and how can it be used to pass data up the view hierarchy?
Preference key is a tool for sending data up from a child view to a parent view. The child sets a value, using the preference modifier. The parent listens for that value using the onPreferenceChange modifier. This is useful when a parent needs to know its child's size or state.
How would you create a custom layout in SwiftUI?
You create a custom layout by making a new type that conforms to the layout protocol. You have to implement two methods. One to tell SwiftUI your layout's total size, and another to tell SwiftUI exactly where to place each child view.
What is the purpose of the .environment modifier?
The environment modifier lets you place a value, like a theme, into a view's surroundings. Any child view can then easily access that value using the addEnvironment property wrapper, without it being passed down through every view.
How do you handle asynchronous operations and data fetching in a SwiftUI view?
You handle async work with the task modifier on a view. It runs your code when the view appears and cancels it automatically when the view disappears. Inside, use async and await to fetch data, then update the view state.
Explain the difference between navigation view and navigation stack.
Navigation view is the old way to navigate by pushing screens. Navigation stack is the new, better way. It uses a list of data to control the navigation path. This makes it much easier to manage navigation with code. Use Navigation Stack for new apps.
What is a view builder and where is it commonly used?
A view builder is an attribute that lets you list several views in a block of code, and it automatically combines them. It's used in containers like VStack and HStack, so you can easily list child views without extra syntax.
How do you create custom animations and transitions in SwiftUI?
To make custom animations, wrap state changes in a withAnimation block. To make custom transitions, define how a view should change when it appears or disappears using modifiers, and then package this as a reusable AnyTransition.
What is the role of the identifiable protocol in SwiftUI lists and for each structures?
The identifiable protocol helps SwiftUI tell items in a list apart. When data changes, SwiftUI uses the item's unique ID to update the screen efficiently and smoothly. This improves performance and makes animations work correctly.
Describe the purpose of Geometry Reader and the potential performance implications of using it.
Geometry Reader is a tool that tells a view how much space its parent gives it. This is useful for flexible layouts, but can be slow because it recalculates often. This can hurt performance, so use it only when you must know the parent's size.
How can you integrate a UIKit view or view controller into a SwiftUI view?
To use a UIKit view, wrap it in a UI view representable. To use a UIKit view controller, wrap it in a UI view controller representable. You need to provide methods to create and update the component. A coordinator helps send information back to SwiftUI.
What are custom modifiers and how do you create them?
Custom modifiers let you save and reuse a group of style changes. You create one by making a struct that follows the view modifier protocol. Inside, a body method applies your saved styles to the view content.
Explain the concept of view identity in SwiftUI and how it affects state preservation.
View identity is how SwiftUI tells views apart. By default, a view's place on the screen is its identity. If it moves, its state is lost. You can use the ID modifier to give a view a stable name, which helps SwiftUI preserve its state even if it moves.
How do you manage navigation in a SwiftUI app, particularly with deep linking?
You manage navigation with Navigation Stack, which uses a list of data to represent the screens. To go to a new screen, you add an item to that list. For deep linking, you read a URL, build the list of data from it, and instantly show the correct screen.
What is the difference between @state, @binding, @observedObject, @environmentObject, and @stateObject?
@state is for private data in one view. @binding links to another view's state. @observedObject watches an external object. @stateObject is like an observed object, but the view owns the object. @environmentObject is shared across many views without passing it manually.
Can you use a SwiftUI view modifier on a UI view representable? Explain the behavior and any potential limitations.
Yes, you can use view modifiers on a representable. Modifiers for layout like frame and padding work because SwiftUI wraps the UIKit view and applies the effect to the wrapper. However, some complex modifiers might not work as expected because they are operating on a container, not the internal content of the UIKit view.
How do you handle data input from a UI text field, wrapped in UI view representable, and update a at state property in your SwiftUI view?
To get text from a UI text field, use a coordinator as its delegate. The coordinator will have a binding to a string in your SwiftUI view. In the delegate method that fires when text changes, update the binding with the text field's new text. This keeps your SwiftUI state in sync.
What is the role of the context struct that is passed as an argument to the methods of UI view representable?
The context struct gives your UIKit view information from SwiftUI. It contains the coordinator for handling events, the transaction for animations, and the environment for things like dark mode or font sizes.
Discuss how you would manage accessibility, e.g. VoiceOver, to ensure a seamless user experience across mixed UIKit and SwiftUI components.
For accessibility, you need to set the label, value, and hint on your UIKit view from within your representable code. The coordinator can help manage custom accessibility actions. The goal is to make the wrapped UIKit view behave like a native SwiftUI element for screen readers.
How can the coordinator object modify the SwiftUI view's state via bindings?
The coordinator can change SwiftUI's state by using a binding. When you create the coordinator, you pass it a binding from your SwiftUI view. The coordinator can then change the binding's value whenever a UIKit event happens, which updates the state in your SwiftUI code.
Explain how to resolve auto layout constraint conflicts when a UI view with its own constraints is embedded within a SwiftUI view.
To fix layout conflicts, you can adjust the UIKit view's content hugging and compression resistance priorities to make it more flexible. Another way is to wrap your view inside a container view. This container can handle the internal constraints, making it easier for SwiftUI to manage the layout.
How can you pass SwiftUI environment values, like .color scheme or .layout direction, down into a wrapped UIKit view?
You can access environment values through the context object passed to your make and update methods. For instance, context.environment.colorScheme will tell you if it's light or dark mode. You can then use that information to configure your UIKit view.
Describe a strategy for migrating a large, existing UIKit application to SwiftUI, focusing on a phased approach using interoperability.
For a large migration, start small. First, replace simple UI elements like buttons or cells with SwiftUI versions. Then, build new features entirely in SwiftUI and host them in your UIKit app. Over time, you can replace bigger and bigger parts of the app until the migration is complete.
What are the key performance considerations to keep in mind to avoid bottlenecks when frequently updating a UI view representable from SwiftUI state changes?
To avoid performance issues, first, make your representable conform to Equatable. This stops unnecessary updates. Second, inside the Update UI View method, check if the new values are actually different from the current ones before applying changes. This prevents doing extra work.
How can you leverage Combine publishers to bridge state changes from a legacy UIKit component to a modern SwiftUI interface?
To bridge a state change with Combine, have your coordinator subscribe to a publisher from the UIKit component. In the subscriber sync method, the coordinator receives the new value and can update a binding. This update then refreshes your SwiftUI view.
Discuss the lifecycle differences between a standard UI view controller and one managed by UI view controller representable. How do they map?
The lifecycles map closely. The make method is like init. The update method is called whenever SwiftUI state changes. The dismantle method is like dainit. Standard methods, like ViewDidLoad and ViewWillAppear, are still called as usual by the underlying UIKit system.
How do you ensure that a wrapped UIKit view correctly responds to environment changes in SwiftUI, such as dark mode or dynamic type?
To handle changes like dark mode, you check the environment inside the UpdateUIView method. This method is called when the environment changes. You can read the current color scheme or font size from the context, and then apply those styles to your UIKit view.
Explain how to approach integrating a complex UIKit navigation stack, UI Navigation Controller, with newly introduced SwiftUI views.
To mix navigation, keep your UIKit UI Navigation Controller. When you want to show a new SwiftUI screen, wrap it in a UI hosting controller. Then, you can push that hosting controller onto the navigation stack just like any other view controller. This lets you add SwiftUI views one by one.
What is the function of the DismantleUIView method in UIViewRepresentable, and why is it important for cleanup?
The DismantleUIView method is for cleanup. It's called when the view is about to be removed. You should use it to remove observers, stop timers, or free up any other resources to prevent memory leaks.
How can you handle target action patterns from a UIKit control, like a UI button tap, within the SwiftUI part of your code?
You can handle button taps using a coordinator. In your MakeUIView method, set the coordinator as the target for the button's action. When the button is tapped, the coordinator's action method is called, which can then update your SwiftUI view state.
What layout and sizing challenges can arise when placing a UIKit view inside a SwiftUI layout?
Sizing can be tricky because SwiftUI and UIKit have different layout systems. A UIKit view might not get the size it expects, so you often have to set an explicit size using the frame modifier. Also, internal constraints in the UIKit view can conflict with the layout SwiftUI gives it.
How do you manage data flow and state synchronization between a SwiftUI view and a UIKit component it wraps?
For data flow, you use properties. For data going from SwiftUI to UIKit, use regular properties and update the view in the UpdateUIView method. For two-way data flow, use a binding. The UIKit view can change the binding's value, which updates the SwiftUI state.
Describe a practical scenario where using UIViewControllerRepresentable is more appropriate than using UIViewRepresentable.
You should use UIViewControllerRepresentable when you need to integrate a full view controller, not just a view. A good example is using the Image Picker, the Mail Composer, or the Safari View Controller, which all manage their own screen.
Explain how you would use a delegate pattern to communicate from a wrapped UIKit view back to its hosting SwiftUI view.
To use a delegate, create a coordinator class that acts as the delegate. In your MakeUIView method, assign the coordinator as the delegate of your UIKit view. When a delegate method is called, the coordinator can then update a binding to send data back to your SwiftUI view.
What is the purpose of the coordinator class when implementing UIViewRepresentable or UIViewControllerRepresentable?
The coordinator class handles communication from a UIKit component back to SwiftUI. It's used for things like delegate methods or button taps. The coordinator listens for these events and updates your SwiftUI view state.
How do you embed a SwiftUI view into an existing UIKit view hierarchy using UI Hosting Controller?
To embed a SwiftUI view, first create your view. Then, create a UI hosting controller with that view. Finally, add the hosting controller as a child to your UIKit view controller, and add its view to the screen with the necessary layout constraints.
What is the responsibility of the UpdateUIView method in UIViewRepresentable, and under what circumstances is it called?
The UpdateUIView method updates the UIKit view when data in your SwiftUI code changes. It's called automatically whenever a bound state value is modified, keeping the view in sync.
Explain the role of the MakeUIView method within the UIViewRepresentable protocol.
The MakeUIView method creates the UIKit view you want to show. It's only called one time to set up the initial view.
Describe the core function of the UIViewRepresentable protocol. When would you choose to use it?
The UIView representable protocol wraps a UIKit view, so you can use it in SwiftUI. You'd use it for components that only exist in UIKit, like maps or text fields, or for your own custom UIKit views.
What is the primary purpose of the UI hosting controller class in the context of UIKit and SwiftUI interoperability?
The UI hosting controller class lets you put a SwiftUI view inside a UIKit app. It's a view controller that holds a SwiftUI view, making it easy to mix new and old code.
Explain the difference between strong, weak, and unowned references and their role in preventing memory leaks.
Strong, weak, and unowned are used to manage memory. Strong is the default, and it keeps an object in memory. Weak and unowned are used to prevent memory leaks called retained cycles, which happen when two objects hold strong references to each other. A weak reference can become nil, so it's always an optional. An unowned reference is assumed to always have a value, so using it incorrectly can crash your app.
How would you optimize performance when fetching a large number of records from core data? Mention techniques like batching and faulting.
To speed up fetching lots of data in core data, you can use a few key techniques. Set a fetch batch size to only load data in small chunks as you need it. Use properties to fetch to only ask for the specific data fields you need, not the whole object. And always perform large fetches in the background, so your app's user interface doesn't freeze.
What are NS predicate objects used for in core data, and how can they be used to create compound predicates?
NS predicates are used in core data to filter your data. They work like a where clause in a database query, letting you specify conditions to find the exact objects you need. You can also create compound predicates to combine multiple conditions. For example, finding all users who are over 18 and live in California.
What are affine transformations in core graphics, and can you provide an example of their use?
Affine transformations let you move, rotate, or scale what you are drawing in core graphics without changing the drawing instructions. For example, instead of calculating all the points for a rotated square, you can just tell the graphics context to rotate first, and then draw a normal square. The context will handle drawing it in the rotated position for you.
Describe how you would create a custom UI view that draws a linear gradient using core graphics.
To draw a gradient in a custom view, you need to write code in its draw method. Inside this method, you use core graphics. You'll get the graphics context, create a list of colors, and then create a gradient object. Finally, you tell the context to draw the linear gradient by giving it a start and end point, and it will fill the view with that gradient.
What is a CG path, and how would you use it to draw complex shapes?
A CG path is how you describe a complex shape using a series of lines and curves. Think of it as a mathematical blueprint for a shape's outline. You create a path, add lines and curves to build your custom shape, and then you can draw that shape's outline or fill it with color inside a graphics context.
How do you save changes to a core data persistent store, and why should this be handled carefully?
To save changes in core data, you call the save method on your context. You need to be careful because saving can be slow and might freeze the user interface if done on the main thread. Also, the save operation can fail, so you must use error handling to catch any problems and prevent the app from crashing.
What is an NS persistent container in core data, and how did it simplify the core data stack setup?
The NS persistent container makes setting up core data much easier. In the past, you had to write a lot of code to manually create and connect all the parts of the core data stack. Now, you just create a persistent container, and it handles all that's set up for you, giving you a ready-to-use database with just a couple lines of code.
Explain the difference between value types and reference types in Swift.
Value types and reference types differ in how they are copied. When you copy a value type, like a struct, you get a completely new and independent instance. When you copy a reference type, like a class, you just get another pointer to the single, original instance in memory.
What is Grand Central Dispatch, GCD, and how is it used for concurrency in iOS?
Grand Central Dispatch, or GCD, is how you manage running multiple tasks at once in iOS. You use it to run heavy work, like downloading data from the internet, on a background thread. This keeps your user interface from freezing. When the work is done, you can easily send an update back to the main thread to refresh the display.
What are closures in Swift? Provide an example of a trailing closure.
Closures are blocks of code that you can pass around and use like variables, often for things like completion handlers. Trailing closure syntax is a shortcut. If a closure is the last argument to a function, you can write it after the function's parentheses, which makes the code much easier to read.
Explain the difference between frame and bounds in a UI view, and how they relate to the coordinate system.
A view's frame tells you its location and size inside of its parent view. Think of it as where the view is placed on a larger canvas. A view's bounds describes its own internal drawing area, where its own top left corner is 0, 0. You use the frame to position the view, and the bounds to draw inside of it.
What is a graphics context, CG context, in Core Graphics?
A graphics context, or CG context, is basically your drawing board in Core Graphics. It's where all of your drawing happens. It holds all the drawing settings, like the current color and line thickness. Whether you're drawing to the screen or a PDF, you do it all within a graphics context.
How do you draw a simple shape like a rectangle or a circle, using a CG context in Core Graphics?
To draw a shape like a rectangle, you first get the graphics context. Then, you set your desired color. Next, you define the rectangle shape and add it to the context. Finally, you tell the context to draw the shape by either filling it with color or just drawing its outline.
What is the primary purpose of the Core Graphics framework in iOS?
The main purpose of the Core Graphics framework is to give you a powerful way to do custom 2D drawing. You use it to draw shapes, create gradients, build custom user interface elements from scratch, or even generate PDF documents.
What are fetch results controllers, NS Fetch Results Controller, and how do they help in displaying core data objects in a table view?
An NS Fetch Results Controller is a great tool for connecting core data to a table view. It fetches data efficiently and automatically detects any changes. It then tells your table view exactly how to animate updates, like inserting or deleting rows, keeping your display perfectly in sync with your database.
How do you handle core data migrations, and what is the difference between lightweight and heavyweight migrations?
Core data migration updates your database when your data model changes. Lightweight migration is automatic and handles simple changes, like adding a new field. Heavyweight migration is a manual process you must use for complex changes, where you have to provide specific instructions on how to update the data.
What is an NS Managed Object Context and what is its role in managing objects in core data?
An NS Managed Object Context is like a temporary workspace for your core data objects. You load objects into it, make all your changes there, and then save the context to make those changes permanent in your database. It keeps track of everything you've done until you're ready to save.
Explain the difference between an NS Managed Object and a regular Swift class.
A regular Swift class just holds data in memory. An NS Managed Object is a special class for core data whose data is connected to a database. Its lifecycle is managed by a core data context, and it has built-in features for tracking changes and managing relationships.
What is the core data stack? Can you describe its main components? NS Managed Object Context, NS Persistent Store Coordinator, and NS Managed Object Model?
The core data stack manages your app's saved data. It has three key parts. The Managed Object Model is the blueprint for your data. The Persistent Store Coordinator connects that blueprint to the actual database file. And the Managed Object Context is your temporary workspace where you modify data before you save it.
What is the purpose of the Codable protocol in Swift and how does it simplify data parsing?
The Codable protocol makes it really easy to convert your data into formats like JSON, and back again. Instead of writing a lot of code to parse data yourself, you just add Codable to your struct or class, and Swift handles most of the work for you.
Describe the difference between let and var in Swift, and how they relate to immutability.
In Swift, let creates a constant, which means you can't change its value. Var creates a variable, so you can change its value. Using let whenever possible makes your code safer because it prevents accidental changes.
What are optionals in Swift and why are they important for safety?
Optionals in Swift are used when a value might be missing. An optional can either hold a value or be nil. This makes your code safer because Swift requires you to check if the value is nil before you can use it, which helps prevent your app from crashing.
Explain the concept of automatic reference counting (ARC) in Swift.
Automatic reference counting, or ARC, is how Swift manages memory. It counts how many active references there are to an object. When that count drops to 0, ARC automatically removes the object from memory. This helps prevent memory leaks.
What is the difference between a class and a structure in Swift, and when would you use one over the other?
The main difference is that classes are reference types, while structures are value types. Copying a class just points to the same object, while copying a struct creates a brand new copy. It's best to use structs for simple data, and use classes when you need features like inheritance or want to share one object in many places.
How does process assertion work within an app extension, and when would you use it to prolong its lifecycle?
A process assertion is like asking the system, "Please give me a few more seconds to finish this important task before you shut me down." You use it to wrap critical code, like saving a file. This is perfect for ensuring a photo edit is saved completely without being interrupted. It is not for long tasks like network downloads.
Describe a scenario involving a photo editing extension and detail the key lifecycle events from launch to saving the edited image.
First, a user in the Photos app chooses your extension to edit a photo. The system starts your extension and gives it the photo data. Your extension screen appears, and the user makes their edits. When they tap Done, your extension saves the final edited image and a recipe of the changes. It then tells the Photos app it's finished, and the extension closes.
Explain how you would architect an extension to minimize its launch time and memory footprint.
To make an extension fast and lightweight, do as little as possible at launch. Load features and resources only when they are needed. For memory, be careful with large objects like images. Resize them to fit the screen instead of using the original. Release memory for things that are no longer visible to keep the footprint small.
In a share extension, how does the lifecycle adapt to handling different types of input items, e.g., URLs versus images?
A share extension's lifecycle adapts to what you're sharing. When it starts, it checks the input items to see if they are URLs, images, or files. It loads this data asynchronously, which might mean showing a loading spinner in the UI. The extension's features might change based on the type of content it receives before you can post it.
How does the lifecycle of a non-UI extension, like a call directory extension, differ from a UI-based one?
A non-UI extension, like one for blocking calls, has a very simple life. The system runs it in the background to do one specific job, like providing a list of numbers. It does the job, reports back, and closes. It has no user interface. A UI extension's life is based on user interaction with its screen.
What are the security implications of the app extension lifecycle, and how do you mitigate them?
The main security risk is that an extension could leak data or trick the user. To mitigate this, first, only request access to the data types you absolutely need. Second, always validate data coming from the host app. Third, use the secure keychain for passwords and secrets, not the shared app group. Finally, use system services for logging into websites, so your extension never sees the password.
Describe how the cancel request with error method impacts the extension state and the user experience.
Calling cancel request with error tells the host app that something went wrong and the task has failed. It sends an error object to the host so it can inform the user. For the extension, this is the final action. It will be shut down immediately after.
Explain the challenges and solutions for handling asynchronous operations within an extension's limited lifecycle.
The challenge is that an extension might close before a long task finishes. To solve this, for network tasks, use a background URL session which lets the system finish the job. For other short but critical tasks, use a process assertion to ask the system for a little more time. For very long tasks, have the extension save the job and ask the main app to do it.
How would you design a robust data synchronization mechanism between a container app and its multiple extensions?
To sync data between an app and its extensions, store the data in a shared app group using a database like Core Data. Use a tool called NS File Coordinator to prevent the app and extensions from writing to the database at the same time and corrupting it. Then, use persistent history tracking to notify each process when the data has changed so they can update themselves.
Discuss the strategies for managing state when an extension is terminated and relaunched.
To manage state, you must save your work constantly because an extension can be closed unexpectedly. Use a shared space, like an app group, to store data. Every time the extension starts, its first job is to load the saved data to get back to where it was.
What are the limitations on an extension's access to the file system and user data?
Extensions are sandboxed for security. They can't access most data. To share files with their main app, they must use a special shared folder called an app group. To access private user data like photos or contacts, the main app must first ask for the user's permission.
Explain how an extension can be terminated by the system, by the user, and by the extension itself.
An extension can be stopped in 3 ways. 1. The system can stop it for using too much memory or being too slow. 2. The user can stop it by pressing a cancel button. 3. The extension can stop itself after it has finished its job.
How do you handle background tasks initiated by an extension, such as a network request?
For long tasks like a network upload, an extension uses a special background URL session. The extension starts the task and then closes. The system handles the transfer in the background and delivers the result to the main container app, not the extension.
What is the purpose of the complete request, returning items, expiration handler, completion handler method?
This method is used to finish the extension's task and send data back to the host app. It includes a completion handler to confirm the host received the data, and an expiration handler to perform cleanup if the host app takes too long to respond.
Describe the lifecycle differences between a Today widget and a custom keyboard extension.
A Today widget lives a very short life. It appears, shows info quickly, and then goes away. A custom keyboard has a much longer life. Once you choose it, it stays active as you type in many different apps.
How can you debug an app extension that is crashing during its launch phase?
To debug a crashing extension, you need to tell Xcode to watch the extension's process, not just the main app. You can do this by setting the host app as the target to run, and Xcode will connect the debugger automatically when the extension starts. Also, check the device logs for crash details.
Explain the purpose of the NS Extension Request Handling Protocol and its key methods.
The NS Extension Request Handling Protocol provides a starting point for the extension's work. Its main method, begin request, is called when the extension launches, giving it the context and data needed to do its job.
How does an extension signal back to the host app that it has completed its task?
The extension signals it is done by calling a specific function named CompleteRequest. This function can also send data back to the host app. Once called, the extension prepares to close.
What are the memory constraints for an app extension, and what happens if they are exceeded?
Extensions get much less memory than a full app. If an extension uses too much memory, the system instantly shuts it down to protect the host app and the device's performance.
Detail the sequence of events when a host app initiates a request to an extension.
First, you do something in a host app, like hitting the share button. The host app bundles up the data. The system shows you a list of extensions that can handle it. You pick one. The system then starts the extension and gives it the data. Finally, the extension screen appears.
What happens to an extension if its containing app is updated?
If the main app gets an update, its extensions are updated automatically too. The system handles replacing the old extension with the new one.
How is an app extension's UI presented to the user, and how is it dismissed?
The system shows the extension's user interface inside the host app, often as a pop-up or sheet. It's dismissed either when the extension finishes its work, or when the user closes it by tapping a button like Cancel or Done.
Explain the function of the NS extension context object within an extension's lifecycle.
The NS extension context object acts like a messenger. It delivers data from the host app to the extension, and provides the tools for the extension to send a result back or to cancel the task.
What is the role of the host app in launching and terminating an app extension?
The host app starts the process by offering data to share or edit. When you pick an extension, the system launches it. The system also closes the extension when its job is done or if it uses too many resources.
Describe the fundamental difference between an app's lifecycle and an app extension's lifecycle.
An app is a standalone program you open yourself. An app extension is a small helper program that another app, called the host app, uses for a specific task. The extension starts when needed and closes right after it's finished.
How would you design a reusable component such as a custom text field with validation, using MVVM principles?
First, create a dedicated view model for the text field that handles all validation logic and exposes properties, like the current text and any error message. Second, create a custom UI view that holds this view model. The view binds its text field and error label to the view model's properties, making the entire component self-contained and reusable.
Is it permissible for the model to communicate directly with the view model? Justify your answer.
No, the model should not talk to the view model. The model is passive and only holds data. The view model observes the model for changes, but the communication is one way from the view model's perspective.
Explain how you would use Swift's Combine framework to establish a reactive link between a view and a view model.
First, use the @published attribute on a property in the view model. Second, in the view controller, use the .sync method on that property to receive updates. Finally, store the result in an any cancelable set to manage its life cycle and prevent memory leaks.
What are some common challenges or pitfalls when implementing MVVM in a large, long-lived iOS application?
Common challenges are view models growing too large, writing too much boilerplate code for bindings, creating memory leaks from incorrect closure syntax, and handling navigation inconsistently, which can couple screens together.
How does the separation of concerns in MVVM specifically improve the testability of an application?
MVVM makes testing easier by separating logic into the view model. Since the view model has no UI code, you can test it directly in a unit test. This is much faster and more reliable than testing UI code.
In MVVM, which layer is responsible for transforming model data into display-ready formatted strings?
The view model is responsible. It transforms raw model data, like dates and numbers, into formatted strings that are ready to be displayed in the view.
Discuss a robust strategy for handling errors from an API within the view model and communicating them to the view.
The view model should have a property to hold the error state. When an API call fails, the view model catches the error, converts it into a user-friendly format, and updates the error property. The view observes this property and shows an alert or an error message.
How can you facilitate data passing between two different view models when navigating between screens?
A coordinator should handle passing data. The first view model gives the data to the coordinator. The coordinator then creates the second view model and passes that data into its initializer. This keeps view models independent from each other.
In what scenarios might you choose to use Apple's MVC architecture instead of MVVM?
You might use MVC for very simple screens with little logic, or for building quick prototypes. For small projects where extensive testing is not a priority, MVC can be a faster and simpler choice.
How is the lifecycle of a view model typically managed in relation to its associated view controller?
The view model's lifecycle matches its view controllers. It's created with the view controller and is destroyed when the view controller is destroyed. The view controller holds a strong reference to the view model.
Describe a clean approach to bind a Utable view's data source to a property in a view model.
The view model should expose an array of smaller view models, one for each cell. The view controller then configures each table view cell using the corresponding cell view model from the array. This keeps cell-level logic separate.
What is a fat view model, and what strategies can be used to refactor it?
A fat view model is one that has too much code and responsibility. To fix it, you can break it into smaller, child view models for different parts of the screen. You can also move business logic into separate objects called use cases.
How do you manage dependencies and asynchronous operations like network calls within a view model?
Dependencies are injected into the view model's initializer. For network calls, the view model calls a function on a dependency. It then updates properties like is loading or error. The view watches these properties and updates the UI.
Explain how navigation should be handled in an MVVM architecture. What is the role of a coordinator?
Navigation should be handled by a coordinator. When it's time to navigate, the view model notifies the coordinator. The coordinator then creates and presents the new view and its view model. This keeps navigation logic separate from the UI and business logic.
How would you structure the unit test for a view model to ensure its logic is correct?
To unit test a view model, you first create it with mock dependencies. Then, you call its functions to simulate actions. Finally, you check its properties to make sure they have the correct values for the given scenario.
What are the main advantages of adopting MVVM over MVC for an iOS project?
The main advantages of MVVM are better testability, because the view model is separate from the UI, and a better separation of logic, which prevents massive view controllers. This leads to cleaner and more maintainable code.
How do you handle user actions such as button taps in an MVVM design?
The view captures user actions, like a button tap, and immediately calls a function on the view model. The view model then performs all the necessary logic for that action.
Can a view model hold a direct reference to a view, e.g., a UI view controller? Explain the reasoning.
No, a view model should not hold a direct reference to a view. This makes the view model dependent on the UI, which makes it hard to test. It also creates a memory leak because the view and view model would hold strong references to each other.
Describe how a view model can expose data to the view in a way that the view can observe changes.
A view model can expose data for observation using closures, which are called when data changes. A more modern way is using the Combine framework, where you mark a property with it published, and the view subscribes to it for updates.
How can you implement data binding in Swift without using external frameworks like RxSwift or Combine?
You can use property observers, like did set, along with closures. The view model has a property, and its did_set block calls a closure. The view controller provides this closure, which contains the code to update the UI when the property changes.
What is the primary role of the view model in the MVVM architecture?
The view model's main job is to prepare data for the view. It takes raw data from the model, formats it for display, and holds the logic for how the view should behave. It represents the state of the UI.
What is the key difference between MVVM and Apple's MVC?
In MVC, the view controller does too much work, leading to large, complex files. In MVVM, the view model takes over the presentation logic, making the view controller much simpler. The view controller's job is just to manage the UI and pass user actions to the view model.
Explain the concept of data binding in the context of iOS and MVVM.
Data binding is a technique that automatically syncs data between the view model and the view. When a property in the view model changes, the UI element it is connected to updates automatically, and vice versa. This reduces manual update code.
How does data flow between the view model and model in MVVM?
Data flows in both directions. The view sends user actions to the view model. The view model can then update the model. When the model's data changes, it notifies the view model, which in turn updates the view's UI.
What are the three core components of the MVVM pattern, and their primary responsibilities?
The three core components are the model, the view, and the view model. The model handles data and business logic. The view is the user interface. The view model prepares data from the model for the view to display and manages the view state.
Describe a strategy for managing application-wide state using a behavior subject or similar mechanism.
A good strategy is to have a central store for your app state. This store holds the state in a private behavior subject. Other parts of the app can't change this state directly. Instead, they subscribe to a public, read-only version of it. To change the state, they must call special methods on the store, which then updates the private subject. This gives you one single source of truth for your app's data.
Explain the purpose of the using operator for resource management.
The using operator helps manage resources safely. It's for things that you need to open and then close, like a file. The operator takes care of creating the resource when a subscription starts, and automatically disposing of it when the subscription ends, even if there's an error. This guarantees that you won't have leaks.
How do you test your RxSwift code, particularly asynchronous operations?
You test RxSwift code using special tools called RxTest and RxBlocking. RxTest lets you create a virtual timeline to test asynchronous code. You can pretend that time is passing very quickly to check if operators, like debounce, work correctly. RxBlocking is simpler. It lets you run an observable and wait for it to finish. Then you can just check if the final result was what you expected.
How would you handle pagination in a UI table view or UI collection view using RxSwift?
For pagination, you can create a trigger that fires when the user scrolls near the bottom of a list. You can detect this by watching the WillDisplayCell event. When the trigger fires, it starts a network request for the next page of data. The new data is then added to your existing list of items. This updated list is then bound to the table view, which refreshes to show the new items.
What is backpressure and how can you handle it in RxSwift?
Backpressure happens when a data stream produces information faster than you can process it. Imagine a fire hose connected to a small straw. This can cause memory problems. In RxSwift, you handle this by using operators like throttle, debounce, or sample. These operators intelligently drop some of the data so your app can keep up, for example by only taking the latest value every second.
How can you convert a delegate pattern into an RxSwift observable sequence?
You can turn a delegate into an observable using a tool called Delegate Proxy. A delegate is something that responds to events. The proxy intercepts these events. Instead of just calling a method, the proxy can send the event's data into an observable stream. This lets you subscribe to delegate events just like any other data stream in RxSwift.
What are traits in RxSwift like driver signal, and why are they useful?
Traits are special types of observables that make your code safer and easier to understand. For example, the driver trait guarantees that the code will run on the main UI thread and that it won't produce an error. This is perfect for connecting data to UI elements. Using traits helps prevent common bugs by enforcing rules at compile time.
How would you implement a search bar with a network request using RxSwift?
To make a search bar, you first get a stream of text from the search bar. Then, you use debounce to wait for the user to pause typing. Next, you use distinct until change to avoid searching for the same text twice. After that, you use flat map latest to trigger the network request. This cancels old searches if the user types again. Finally, you bind the results to your table view on the main thread.
Provide an example where flat map latest is more suitable than flat map.
Flat map latest is perfect for a search bar. When a user types, each letter could start a new network search. If you use flat map, all those searches run, and old results might show up after new ones. With flat map latest, as soon as the user types a new letter, the previous search is canceled. This means you only care about the result for the very latest thing they typed.
Explain the use of single, completable, and maybe traits.
Single, completable, and maybe are specialized streams. Single is for when you expect exactly one value or an error, like a network request for a user profile. Completable is for when you don't expect a value, just success or failure, like saving a file. Maybe is for when you might get one value, or nothing, or an error, like looking for something in a cache.
Describe the difference between throttle and debounce.
Throttle and debounce both reduce the number of events, but in different ways. Debounce is like waiting for quiet. It only sends the last event after a pause. Think of a search bar. You wait for the user to stop typing. Throttle is like a rate limiter. It lets the first event through, then ignores all others for a set amount of time. Think of preventing a user from tapping a button too quickly.
What is a scheduler and why might you use main scheduler or concurrent dispatch queue scheduler?
A scheduler in RxSwift controls which thread your code runs on. You use main scheduler to run code on the main thread, which is necessary for updating the user interface. You use concurrent dispatch queue scheduler to run code on a background thread. This is for heavy tasks like network requests, so you don't freeze the UI.
How do you combine multiple observables? Describe operators like zip and combine latest.
You can combine streams with operators like zip and combine latest. Zip pairs up items from streams like a zipper. It takes the first item from stream A and the first from stream B and emits them together. Then it waits for the second from both, and so on. Combine latest is different. Whenever a new item appears on any stream, it combines that new item with the latest items from all the other streams.
What is a replay subject and when would you use it?
A replay subject is like a DVR for your data stream. You tell it how many recent items to record. When a new subscriber joins, it first plays back those recorded items, and then continues with the live stream. This is useful when new listeners need some recent history, not just future updates.
Explain the concept of hot versus cold observables.
A cold observable is like a movie on Netflix. It starts from the beginning every time someone presses play. Each person gets their own private showing. A hot observable is like a live TV broadcast. It's happening whether you are watching or not. If you tune in late, you miss the beginning and just see what's happening right now.
What is the purpose of the share, replay, scope operator?
The share operator prevents doing the same work over and over. Imagine a network request. Without share, every time something subscribes, a new network request is made. With share, the first subscriber triggers the request, and all other subscribers just get the result of that single request.
What is a driver in RxCoco, and what are its main characteristics?
A driver is a safe and efficient way to handle data for your user interface. First, it can't produce an error, so it won't crash your app. Second, it always runs on the main thread, which is required for UI updates. Third, it shares its result with all listeners, so the work is only done once.
Explain the difference between map, flat map, and concat map.
Map changes each item in a stream to something else. For example, turning numbers into strings. Flat map also changes each item, but turns it into a new stream, and then combines all those new streams into one. It's useful for things like network requests. Concat map is like flat map, but it makes sure to process the new streams one at a time in order.
What is a control property and a control event in RxCoco?
In RxCoco, a control property represents a value on a UI element that you can both watch and change, like the text in a text field. A control event represents an action from a UI element, like a button tap. It just tells you that the event happened.
What is the purpose of the bind to operator in RxCoco?
The bind to operator is a simple way to connect a data stream to a user interface element. For example, you can bind a stream of text to a label. Whenever the stream emits a new text value, the label updates automatically. It's a clean and safe way to keep your UI in sync with your data.
How do you handle errors in an RxSwift stream?
You handle errors with operators like catcher. When a data stream sends an error, it normally stops. The catcher operator lets you catch that error and, instead of stopping, you can provide a default value or start a different stream. This prevents your app from crashing.
Describe the difference between a publish subject and a behavior subject.
A published subject only sends out new items to its subscribers. If you subscribe late, you miss past items. A behavior subject always remembers the last item. When you subscribe to it, you immediately get the most recent item, and then all the new ones after that.
What is a dispose bag and what problem does it solve?
A dispose bag helps prevent memory leaks. When you subscribe to a data stream, you create a connection. This connection must be broken when you're done with it. A dispose bag holds all these connections and automatically breaks them for you when the object that owns it is destroyed.
Explain the core components of RxSwift: observables, observers, and schedulers.
The core parts are observables, observers, and schedulers. Observables are the streams of data. Observers listen to those streams for new values or errors. Schedulers decide which thread the work should be done on, like a background thread for processing or the main thread for updating the user interface.
What is reactive programming and how does it differ from traditional imperative programming?
Reactive programming is about creating streams of data and reacting to changes automatically. In traditional programming, you give step-by-step commands. In reactive programming, you set up relationships, so when one piece of data changes, anything that depends on it updates on its own.
How would you approach unit testing a view model that exposes an observable for an Rx data source?
To test a view model that uses Rx data sources, you use a library called RxTest. It lets you create a virtual timeline to simulate events, like a user tapping a button. You can then record the section model data that the view model outputs and check if it's exactly what you expected for each simulated event.
Explain how the differentiable type protocol works and in what scenario you would use it.
Differentiable type is an older protocol that was used to help the library figure out what changed in your data. It has been mostly replaced by the newer and simpler identifiable type and equatable protocols, which do the same job in a more standard way.
How would you design and implement expandable and collapsible sections with RX data sources?
To make sections expandable, you add a property like isExpanded to your section data. When a user taps a header, you flip this property. Then you create a new version of your data list where collapsed sections have an empty list of items. When you publish this new list, the animated data source automatically adds or removes the rows with a nice animation.
Explain the purpose and use cases for the DecideView transition closure.
The DecideView transition closure lets you choose whether changes to your data should be animated or if the whole view should just reload. This is useful for performance. For small changes, you can use animations, but for very big changes, a simple reload is faster.
What are the key performance considerations when using RX TableView section animated data source with very large datasets?
With very large amounts of data, calculating the changes for animation can be slow and freeze the user interface. The best practice is to move this calculation to a background thread, so the main thread stays responsive, and then apply the visual updates back on the main thread.
How would you implement drag-and-drop reordering in a UI collection view using RX data sources?
To implement drag-and-drop, you can use a closure on the data source called MoveItem. When a user drags an item to a new spot, this closure is called. You use the information it provides to update your main data list to match the new order, which then updates the view.
What is animation configuration, and how can you use it to customize insertion and deletion animations?
Animation configuration is a settings object that lets you change the default animations for inserting, deleting, or reloading rows. You can choose different styles, like fade or slide, to customize how the table view animates changes.
How do you bind supplementary views, like custom headers, in a UI collection view using Configure Supplementary View?
For custom headers in a collection view, you use the Configure Supplementary View closure when you set up your data source. This code runs when a header is needed, letting you dequeue your custom header view and fill it with data from the right section.
What are the benefits of using RX data sources over the standard RX Swift items, cell identifier, cell type binder?
The basic items binder is good for simple lists. RX data sources is much more powerful. It gives you support for multiple sections, automatic animations when data changes, and better ways to handle headers and footers.
How can you display an empty state view when the data source receives an empty array of sections?
You can listen to your data stream. If the list of sections it sends is empty, you hide the table view and show a special view that says no data available. If the list has data, you show the table and hide the empty message.
In an MVVM architecture, where should the transformation of business models to section model instances typically occur?
In an MVVM architecture, the view model is responsible for converting your business data into the section model structure that the view needs. The view then simply binds to this pre-formatted data from the view model.
Describe a strategy for updating a single item within a section without reloading the entire table.
To update a single item, you change the data for that item in your original data list. Then, you push the entire updated list to your data stream. The animated data source is smart enough to see that only one item changed, and will only reload that specific row.
How can you handle multiple distinct cell types within the same UI table view using RX data sources?
To use different cell types, create an enum to represent your various data models. In your configure cell code, use a switch statement on the enum. Each case in the switch will then set up a different kind of cell.
How do you implement swipe to delete functionality using the canEditRow@index path and model deleted observables?
To add swipe to delete, you first enable editing for the rows. Then, you subscribe to the table view's reactive model deleted property. When a user swipes and deletes, this sends you the data model, so you can remove it from your main data list.
Explain the roles of identifiable type and equatable in the context of animated data sources.
Identifiable type gives each data item a unique ID, so the system can tell if an item is new, has moved, or was deleted. Equatable is used to check if an item with the same ID has different content, which means it needs to be updated.
What protocols must your item models conform to for RxTableView section animated data source to calculate changes?
To use the animated data source, your data items need to conform to the identifiable type and equatable protocols. This lets the data source track which items are which and know when they've changed.
What is the key difference between RxTableView section reload data source and RxTableView section animated data source?
The reload data source reloads the entire table every time data changes, which can look jarring. The animated data source is smarter. It calculates the exact changes and applies smooth animations for insertions, deletions, and moves.
Describe how to get the model object for a specific index path from the data source instance.
You can get the data for any row by using the index path, like an array index on your data source object. For example, data source at index path gives you the item for that row.
How does RxDataSources simplify cell reuse compared to a manual YAHBOView data source implementation?
RxDataSources handles the complex parts of cell reuse for you. You just tell it how to set up a cell once in the configure cell block, and the library makes sure to reuse cells correctly behind the scenes.
Explain how to add section headers and footers using the title for header and section closure.
When you set up your data source, you can provide code for title for header and section. This code looks at the data for a specific section and returns the text you want to display in the header.
How do you handle cell tap events using the model selected observable?
To handle taps, you subscribe to the table view's reactive model selected property. When a user taps a cell, this property sends you the data model for that specific cell.
Describe the purpose of the configure cell closure in a data source.
The configure cell closure is where you set up what each cell looks like. It's a piece of code that runs for every row, giving you the data for that row so you can put it into a decute cell.
How do you bind an observable sequence to a UI table view using RxTableView section reload data source?
You create a data source object and tell it how to set up your cells. Then, you take your stream of data and use the bind operator to connect it to your table view's reactive items property using the data source you just created.
Explain the role of section model in structuring data for a table or collection view.
Section model is a container that organizes your data. It holds the data for a section header, like a title, and a list of items for the rows in that section.
What is the primary purpose of RxDataSources, and what problem does it solve?
RxDataSources simplifies connecting data to table and collection views. It replaces a lot of manual data source code with a more modern, reactive style, and automatically handles things like sections and animations when your data changes.
How can you analyze code coverage for tests written with Quick and Nimble, and what tools would you integrate into a CI/CD pipeline to report on it?
Code coverage works with Quick and Nimble, just like with regular tests. You can turn it on in Xcode settings. In a CI/CD pipeline, you can use tools to export the coverage data and send it to services like CodeCov. These services can track your coverage and even block code changes if the coverage is too low.
Discuss strategies for managing and organizing a large test suite with hundreds of quick specs for optimal performance and maintainability.
To manage many tests, first, organize your test files into folders that match your app's features. Second, use shared examples to avoid repeating code. Third, run tests in parallel on your server to speed things up. Fourth, you can split tests into different groups, like fast unit tests and slower UI tests, and run them separately.
Explain how to test code that relies on Notification Center without actually posting global notifications and potentially affecting other tests.
To test code that uses Notification Center, don't use the default one directly. Instead, make your class accept a notification center instance when it's created. In your test, you can then create a brand new, separate notification center and give it to your object. This way, notifications are kept local and don't mess up other tests.
Discuss best practices for dependency injection in a class to make it more testable with Qwik.
To make classes easy to test, use dependency injection. This means a class shouldn't create its own dependencies, like a network service. Instead, you should pass them into the class when you create it. In your tests, you can then pass in a fake or mock service, which lets you control its behavior completely.
Describe how you would test a complex UI interaction like a user filling out a form and tapping a button, using Qwik in a UI testing framework.
To test a user interface, you can use Qwik to structure your test and Apple's UI testing tools to interact with the screen. You'd write a test that launches the app, finds text fields, types text into them, taps a button, and then uses a Nimble matcher to check if a success message appears.
What is the purpose of the wait until function in Qwik, and how does it differ from to eventually?
Wait until is used for asynchronous tests where you have a callback function. It pauses the test until you call a special done function inside your callback. This is different from to eventually, which just keeps checking a value over and over.
How do you use the begin with and end with matchers for collections in Nimble?
You use the begin with matcher to check the first item in a list and end with to check the last item. For example, expect 1, 2, 3, .2, begin with 1, checks that the array starts with 1.
Explain the concept of focus tests, describe, context, fit, and why they are useful during development.
Focus tests let you run only the tests you care about right now. You just add an F in front of describe or it, making it describe or fit. This is great when you are fixing a bug and don't want to wait for all the tests to run.
How can you test for notifications being posted using Nimble's Post Notifications Matcher?
Nimble has a Post Notifications Matcher to test if a notification was sent. You wrap the code that sends the notification inside an expect block and tell the matcher which notification you expect to be posted.
What are custom matchers in Nimble, and can you provide a simple example of how to create one?
Custom matchers are assertions that you create yourself to make tests cleaner. For example, you could create a beven matcher to check if a number is even. Then you can write expect for .2 beven, which is easier to read.
How do you configure shared examples with context using it behaves like?
To give a shared example some data, you add a block of code after it behaves like. Inside this block, you create a dictionary with the data. The shared example can then access this data through the context to run the test.
Describe a scenario where you would use shared examples, in Qwik to reduce code duplication.
You use shared examples to avoid writing the same test over and over. For example, if you have many objects that should all behave in a certain way, like having a name, you can write one shared test for that behavior and then apply it to all the different objects.
Explain how to use the thrower matcher in Nimble, and how to specify the exact error type.
To check if code throws an error, you write expect, try your function .to thrower. If you want to check for a specific kind of error, you can add the error type, like thrower, error type, myCustomError.self.
What is the difference between to eventually and to matchers in Nimble when testing asynchronous operations?
The to matcher checks a value right away. The to eventually matcher keeps checking the value for a short period of time, waiting for it to become correct. You use to eventually for things that take time, like network calls.
What is the default timeout for asynchronous tests with to eventually, and how can you change it?
The default timeout for asynchronous tests using to eventually is 1 second. You can change it for a single test by adding a timeout parameter, like timeout.seconds3. You can also change the default for all tests.
How can you group related tests together in a Qwik spec using describe or context?
You group tests by putting them inside describe or context blocks. For example, you can have a describe block for a login screen and then inside it, a context for when the password is correct and another context for when the password is wrong.
How do you chain matchers in Nimble, for example, to check if a number is both greater than 5 and less than 10?
You can chain matchers with an and symbol. To check if a number is greater than 5 and less than 10, you would write expect number dot to be greater than 5 and be less than 10.
How would you assert that an optional variable contains a value without checking for the specific value?
To check that an optional has a value, but you don't care what the value is, you can write expect myOptional dot to not be nil. This simply makes sure the optional is not nil.
Explain the purpose of the it block in a quick spec.
The it block is where your actual test code lives. It defines one specific thing you want to test. The name of the it block should describe the behavior you are checking, like it should save the user.
What is the difference between the equal and b matchers in Nimble?
The equal matcher checks if two values are the same, like the number 5 being equal to 5. The b matcher checks if two variables point to the exact same object in memory. Use equal for values and b for class instances.
What is the role of Nimble in the Quick/Nimble testing framework?
Nimble is the part of the framework that lets you check if your code is working correctly. Quick structures the test, while Nimble provides the tools, called matchers, to write assertions like expect value dot to equal 10.
What is a before each and after each block in Quick, and when would you use them?
Before each runs a piece of code before every test, and after each runs code after every test. You use before each to set up things your test needs, like creating a new object. You use after each to clean up after the test is done.
How do you use the beTrue matcher in Nimble?
To use the beTrue matcher, you write expect followed by your Boolean value, then dot to beTrue. This checks if the value is true. For example, expect myValue dot to beTrue.
Explain the difference between describe and context in a Quick spec.
In Quick, describe and context do the same thing. They group tests. You use describe to name the feature you are testing, and context to explain a specific situation or condition for that feature. This makes your tests easier to read.
What is the main purpose of using Quick and Nimble for testing in iOS development?
Quick and Nimble are used for testing in iOS to write more readable and descriptive tests. Quick helps structure tests around application behavior, and Nimble provides expressive ways to check if your code works as expected.